Alright. What's up, everybody? Today we have a big dose of drama for you. So I read this yesterday, but I don't normally live stream, and I said this is something I get so worked up over this topic, I can't even read it straight away. We're just going to go over it on stream because this is a topic which hits close to home for me. So essentially, this thread got posted. It said smurfing for content like Uthermal, does should be shamed, not celebrated. And I will die on this hill. Have some decency and just do it on your GM accounts like Harston does with his off-meta builds. You don't have to start new accounts and post your insane win rate while ruining games people have no chance against you. All right, so over on Uthermal's YouTube, he has a bunch of 2 Grandmaster series. And what he does with those is he gives himself a specific challenge, like only playing Sky Terran, Proxy Hatch to Grandmaster, Planetary Rush to Grandmaster, and off a new account, he basically plays, and then he gets to Grandmaster, and that completes the challenge. Now, of course, being a pro gamer who is retired very recently, he's still actually in the top, I believe, 30 players in the world, about rank 25 or so. Still an incredibly highly ranked player who probably would be about 6.6k MMR, I would assume, on his main account. So essentially, he's beating people who are lower than him, but he's also doing really weird off-meta builds and challenges that obviously aren't as optimal as his main playstyle. Now, this is not new content. Beastie Cutie was doing this for years beforehand. There's been a lot of different things, but in terms of this show of, obviously I've got to go down a bit. Okay, so in terms of this style, Mass Marauder Viking to Grandmaster, Never Attack to Grandmaster, Protoss Edition, Beastie made this really popular and was doing this for a lot of years. Okay, so you don't have to start new accounts, post your insane win rates while ruining games for people who have no chance against you. It's the same thing in League of Legends. Smurfing videos get a lot of views. You'd think the StarCraft community is more mature and above it, but I guess not. People seem to love what he is doing. He gets lots of views on YouTube, and the subreddit praises him. It's just sad, to be honest. So that was the original post there, but then they've edited this in. By the time I read it, the edit was already there. It got posted pretty early. Edit. Adding one important counter-argument to the, well, if 10 people get smurfed on, but 1,000 people watch the video and have fun, it's worth it and justified. And he says, well, look, you can give that excuse, but by doing this, Uthermal's legitimizing and encouraging smurfing to other viewers to say, hey, just make a new account and just play fun, silly challenges versus lower level players. And you also can obviously, have more fun with it and win a lot of games. It's not just the players Uthermal plays against who are negatively affected. Very similar to how Tyler 1 and other toxic league streamers made toxic behaviors in that game worse by creating a terrible culture. Not necessarily the best example, but in terms of he is doing this, it's going to encourage other people to do it. That makes perfect sense. I absolutely follow that logic. Edit 2. Seems like a slight majority. About 60% of people who voted on this post probably agree that Uthermal smurfing is wrong, but a large number of people actually support his actions. Some say it's not smurfing, but that's just not true. He frequently has something like 90% win rate doing certain challenges. He chose to not do it on a stable GM account and practice the off-meta strats at a close to 50% win rate. He chose to dumpster on low ELO, and yes, even something like Masters is low ELO for an ex-pro depending on the strat, 100% true, for a while with more fresh accounts. He is on the lighter side as far as smurf offenders go, but it's still unequivocally smurfing. I like this point. He's on the lighter side. Obviously, he's not leave 20 games, play 20 games, leave 20 games, play 20 games. That's the worst thing. You just keep yourself in platinum forever, get to diamond, go back to plat, get to diamond, go to plat. He's not doing that. That is more heinous. And as we'll see in the thread, people will say stuff like, well, at least he's not calling people names. It's more toxic if you call people names while stomping them and stuff like that. But I don't think there's any way to argue that it is objectively smurfing. And we'll get into that in more detail in a second. There's also a decent chunk of people who are straight up saying they don't think smurfing is wrong at all, and people should just deal with it. Read through the comments, you'll see these posts. That really puts it into perspective. No wonder smurfing is rampant and smurf videos are popular, even in StarCraft. Some people at least try to justify that with, well, for mass entertainment, it is okay for streamers to smurf. But others legitimately straight up support smurfing in the general sense, and it truly is pathetic that a significant portion of people are this way. I smurfed the ladder from Bronze to GM 3 times, once with Zerg, once with Terran, once with Protoss. I did that. Let's get that out of the way early. I did have some people messaging me and more people in my chat who would be like, oh, I just made a new account. I'm smashing people with this build. It's so much fun. I got inspired by what you did. Or there'd be people on the Smurf Detective series who would say, hey, you guys shitting on Smurfs. I smurf all the time. You've been saying, who are these Smurfs? Why are they doing it? I do it. It's just more fun for me. And I do think that's a truly toxic attitude and kind of terrible. And it kind of is besides the point of playing competitive StarCraft. So I think you can already tell I'm kind of on the side of this post in the majority, but let's just read through the responses to it and explain to you all what's going on and why. He just spears through the lower ELO in like 10 games. Look, he really does try to get Grandmaster, and he doesn't try to stay in the lower MMR at all. So I've had people coming into my chat during Bronze 2 GM, they'd be like, why are you smurfing? Why'd you join the dark side? You're evil. I can't believe you joined them, Pig. And I'd instantly have a bunch of defenders in my Twitch chat, and they would pop up on screen and go, no, shut up. You get out. This is good content. He's teaching. This is great content. This is not smurfing. He's trying to play slow. He's showing us how to play at that level. And there would always be these viewers of mine who would white knight me and go, it's not smurfing. And I would always shut that down immediately. When I was doing Bronze 2 GM, I would immediately say, guys, you can defend me if you want and say it's ethical smurfing or come up with excuses as to why it's not as bad, but it is objectively smurfing. I made a new account. I left my placement matches, and in some cases had to leave even more games, because sometimes I'd get like people leaving games before I could leave game, and then I would have to leave even more games to get put in bronze or silver. I think the first Bronze 2 GM I did, I actually started in like silver rather than bronze, but the other ones I did start all the way down in like bronze 2. It's smurfing. I'm playing people worse than me, and it doesn't matter what handicaps or whatever I put on myself. I'm always going to be beating them if I'm showing you guys how to play properly. Is it a useful tool? Yes. Is it very accessible and does well in the algorithm? Yes. Is it very, very ethically questionable? Well, no, that's not a strong enough word. It is ethically wrong for me to be beating up lower level players and ruining their ladder experiences. And that's why I never wanted to do it. People have been asking me to do a Bronze 2 GM for years, and I caved and I sold out. I did sell out. I had when we were doing my first subathon, Dot put a goal. It was for an insane amount of subs, like 10,000 subs, which I never thought I would get past 1,000 or 2,000 during that stream. She said, look, if we do hit it on the off chance, can I put does a Bronze 2 GM as a goal? And I said, yeah, I don't want to, but you know what? Like, I've already had my mind changed a bit about Vive's Bronze 2 GM because of the influx of the community. I've said, okay, I've already said that I don't hate what Vive did with Bronze 2 GM, and I kind of caved on that, and I did end up smurfing for that. And I didn't really think we'd do it, but there's no excuse. Just because I didn't think I would hit that goal, I still ended up committing to it. I ended up doing it. I smurfed. It was very painful for me leaving those matches because I know what I was doing was wrong. I did it anyway. I got through it. I got some backlash for it. I've got a huge amount of support for it as well, so I cannot argue that it was negative. It was definitely positive for all of my channels. And there is an element of greed and self-interest in why I did it. So let's own up to that off the bat. Better not throw stones from glass houses. Let's put it that way, okay? And when people come in and shit on me for doing Bronze 2 GM, I just want to say I don't really have an excuse. I try to defend myself and say, this is the reason why I did it. Here's my explanation. I know that's not a perfect explanation, but I hope you can accept it. And, I'm very unlikely to ever do another Bronze 2 GM again. Maybe I will at some point, but it would be very spaced out. And when I do it, I try to get through the games reasonably quickly. I don't drag the games out or anything like that. I try to just teach as much as I can, as quickly and as efficiently as I can, but these are all still excuses for a very ethically questionable practice. So the OP of the thread in response to this, he just spears through the lower leagues, he's trying to get GM, says, well, why does he need to spear through lower ELO in the first place? It often takes a lot more games than 10. Why can't he just down 2 or 3 accounts with a stable GM MMR and just play his off-meta builds on those accounts? So what the OP's describing here is kind of what me and Harstem do and a lot of other players. So for those who don't know, if we go to Harstem's YouTube, we can go to mine as well. So I'm not as good at it. I'm definitely not as good at it as these guys. They're a lot better players than I am. Okay, so Harstem, for instance, has beating Grandmasters with stupid stuff, where he does very similar challenges to what Euthermal's doing in his shows. 200 army supply before attacking, proxy nexus, warp prism cannon, so he's trying to fly in a warp prism, unload a probe, and build cannons in his opponent's base. Really stupid builds. If anyone in the chat knows what MMR he plays these at, let me know. Let's take a look. So we can see here Harstem in his beating Grandmasters with stupid stuff. He's playing at 5,200 MMR. He's basically like low GM on this account, or even a little below GM sometimes. So he definitely doing some out there builds. You will be way lower level, right? And that absolutely is going to be the case. So you can also argue that this is smurfing. And for instance, like if you were to, we can look at me as well. I did fastest BC ever. I was practicing this on an account that was, I think, 5,100 MMR when I started practicing with it. And because it was one of my accounts that has a bit lower MMR that I'd originally used in Bronze to GM, it was still in flexible MMR algorithm. So I actually dropped to like 47 or 4,500, losing 5-6 games in a row. Then I won a few games and it ended up being about 5-1, whereas my main Terran is about 5250 MMR right now. So I was smurfing about 150 MMR lower than my main account. I dropped a ton of games. I remember, I think I won 4 games out of like 20 to figure out this BC build. Where I tried to just get the fastest battlecruiser I possibly could, like no SCV production to start, just depot, barracks, gas. It was this crazy challenge, and essentially, you know, it was just ever so slightly below my main account, but I ended up dropping quite a bit as I was figuring the build out and then climbing back up. So you can see there's different layers of trying to get a situation where you can practice a build and do it without, you know, with it being more ethical, right? So if you're close enough to your regular MMR, that's fine. Now, don't get me wrong. I have an account, I do some Zerg challenges at about 5k MMR on the account. And because I basically have accounts where I do the most ridiculous challenges, and so it's naturally about 700, sometimes even 800 MMR below my main account. Sometimes it even dips below 5k because I'm trying to do insane things like expand to both corners and build swarm hosts from them. And people are just butchering me at Masters 1 while I'm figuring the build out. But I try to do that, and I try to always pick one of those accounts so that there's still a chance of me winning and figuring the build out, but it's going to be up against relatively equally skilled opponents. So that's the way I ethically do my challenges these days. I've heard Harston does the same thing. And I've seen some of his other videos where he was on about 5,700 MMR. Or 5,600 while playing some of these Grandmaster silly, beating Grandmasters with stupid stuff challenges. So that's just a little bit of context for you guys to see the different examples which are being suggested by the original poster. The OP, the overpowered original poster. Chat's telling me that's actually Harston's real Terran MMR. He's legitimately that level with Terran when doing challenges. Apparently his Terran's just not that great, and he's doing challenges. He's only about 5,200 MMR. Harston's not as good off race as guys like Raynor and Clem, who are god tier with every single race. So that actually makes sense. So we have a really important question on this from Fear Dragon. Fear Dragon says, look, if you're doing something different that lowers your MMR because you lose 20 games because you're learning, are you allowed to then play standard again now, even though it's likely smurfing since you're no longer figuring things out? So my view on that is no, you're not allowed to. Do you discard the account? No. So that stays your account for discovering things, right? So if I'm discovering a crazy build, usually what happens, right? Say I start at 5.3 or 5.4, which is pretty common because these off non-main accounts, these barcodes I have to try these challenges on, they often lose games at the first. I'll dip 300-400 MMR, then I'll climb back up 200-300 MMR as I figure the build out and start winning. And it'll stabilize pretty somewhere where it started, which is still sometimes 400 or 500 MMR below where it started, right? So what I do there is I don't play my normal builds on it. I go back to it the next time I have another challenge and I go, hey, guess what? It's time for me to start again. I'm going to lose a few hundred MMR and go back up. But I also gauge it. So some of my accounts might be, it's a challenge and it's a bit silly, but I know it's a legitimately good build. It's actually effective at high level, right? So when I came up with the one-base swarm host build, I actually did that on my main account a whole lot. And I do that with a lot of my challenges. I yesterday was recording some challenge builds and I did them on my main account. And after beating some people, I even had them, you know, saying things like, oh, I'm really happy to be part of your content. Great pig. I'm in a video, aren't I? Like, I had multiple people after realizing that I was clearly playing super weird styles. They immediately knew they were going to be featured in a YouTube video. But the reason I did that on my main account and my main MMR is I knew, even though it was off meta and weird, that I would be able to beat people at my normal level. Whereas if I'm trying something crazier, like let's make the fastest battlecruiser ever, which I know is not actually a good build, I'm going to hop on one of those accounts that's a few hundred MMR lower, knowing that even there, I'm going to have very little chance of winning. I hope that clears that one up for you guys. Yeah. Okay, so to get back on the thread, now that I've given you guys some context, doesn't he actually have something on that each new account? he creates, so they're talking about Euthermal here, doesn't Euthermal have something that on each new account he creates, he starts out at a higher base MMR to begin with? I'm not sure what it is. He's definitely mentioned it. His goal isn't to entertain by beating low ELO people. If he purposely stayed low ELO, then I'd agree with you, but he quickly shoots up to Masters within 10 games. I've also seen players ask him what they could have done against his strat. He's really honest and helpful with them. It's not like he's shitting on people to entertain us. So there's a few different points here I want to address. Number one, he's not insulting people or being a dick, and he doesn't seem to have any ill will, and he presents it as, look, I am trying to spearhead through those lower MMR games quickly. I'm not sitting around trolling these guys, and I'm happy to help them if I beat them. Now, being nice about it and having good intentions doesn't change the behavior here, in that you are still playing against those lower MMR people. That is still in of itself an issue, right? On the other hand, he is doing it a little bit more ethically in that he's helping people if they ask for advice, and he is trying to get through. Now, the problem I see, and this is going to be repeated throughout this thread, is people say, well, he gets to Masters. Now, what I couldn't understand what was going on when I read this thread. Because there was people like, well, but he's playing Masters players, that's fine. And I think I've finally realized that people don't realize what Masters is. For 90% of the StarCraft player base, Masters is this pie in the sky, this golden gate. I mean, you are literally you're the Elden Lord. You're the king of the land. You are goddamn, you're Jim Raynor riding Phoenix into battle with Kerrigan wings, shooting Psystorms at people. You are the boss of all bosses. Masters is absolutely insane compared to 90% of the player base. And that's absolutely true. The problem is that Masters is absolute dog shit when it comes to a pro gamer. And even compared to me, I am nowhere near a pro gamer of Euthermal's caliber. And then you go to Maru's caliber or Serral's caliber, right? So you've got the Serral caliber pro gamers to Euthermal, big gap. Very hard for Euthermal to beat those guys in a best of 3 who can take the occasional map. Very hard for me to take even a map off Euthermal. Very hard for a Masters 1 player to take a map off me. Are you starting to see now that there's levels here? A Masters 1 player. Now you go Masters 1 to Masters 3, it's that same gap repeated. It's very hard for a Masters 3 player to beat a Masters 1 player. And then that Masters 1 player struggles to beat me. I struggle to beat Euthermal. Euthermal struggles to beat Serral. There are levels to this, and Masters, GM, Pro are not all one thing. There is a huge range. Masters 3 starts at about 4,300 MMR usually. It varies season to season, but let's say 4,300 MMR. My MMR is about 5,600 MMR, I would say, there. So I'm about 1,200 MMR or so, 1,300 MMR higher than that. Euthermal's another 1,000 MMR on top of that, and then add another 600 or 700 MMR for Serral or Maru. I hope that gives you guys some context. The same reason why if you guys watch Federer play at his peak, or whoever, I guess Djokovic, the best tennis player in the world, up against a rank 5,000 tennis player, you've never seen that. The reason is, when he plays the rank 150 player in the first round of a big tournament, he stomps them and it's not even close. And you've got to realize that a Masters player is nowhere near a rank 150 player in the world. I'm not even rank 150 in the world. So this kind of like, hey, he's playing Masters players and everything is excused once you're playing Masters players, I think that just basically gets told off immediately. It's still much easier games. He develops and refines his strategies through the lower levels. He gets through them quickly, always has good humor, and is humble. The notion that he should only play with his highest account doesn't make sense, as each series is a handicap. Great point from Ultra Laborious. You should not have to play a Planetary Fortress Rush, which is Euthermal's hilarious and entertaining most recent video. I've got to admit it is, guys. It's a very entertaining video. I've watched parts of it. I'm not able to watch the whole thing because I do get a bit thrown off by the smurfing personally, because it is something that when I realize someone's smurfing it, I don't enjoy it as much. But the point here is, like, you shouldn't have to play on your 6.5k MMR account. You could have a 5.5k MMR account as Euthermal where you try these challenges. I've beaten tons of Grandmaster players with Planetary Fortress Rushes. I do it on my Star-Lord account. I do Twitch Plays Pig as a show we do, where guess what the #1, people in chat, they request the strategies. Guess what the #1 requested strategy is? It's Planetary Fortress Rush, because it's the dumbest, most comical rush in the game. Now, I very rarely kill them with the rush, but I can win in the follow-up to it. And I've done that many times, especially against Terran and Protoss players, very rarely against Zerg. The point is there, though, you shouldn't have to play that on your main account, sure. But I still do. Now, I still do because I play at a lower skill level than Euthermal. If I was 6.4, 6.5k, there's no way I could play the same challenge. I would need to hop on a lower account that's closer to mid to high GM rather than top GM. So there's a good point. You don't need to play on the same account, but I explained earlier how I have different accounts for different levels of challenges, and I think that's the best thing I've come to basically being able to do these challenges ethically. Because remember, even if I were to use my main account and then lose 20 games, which would be, people would say, oh, you're not smurfing that way. The problem is, the moment I go back to playing normal on my main account, I am smurfing because I've lowered the MMR so much. So having multiple accounts for different levels of challenges is actually the best way to do it. And as an experienced pro player, you can very quickly figure out within a few games which challenges are really good and which are bad. I often start on my main account and then I realize I'm getting smashed so badly and that it's way harder than I thought, and then I'll swap onto one of my lower accounts and I'll go about 50-50, or sometimes a lot worse than that, like with the Battlecruiser challenge, or a fair bit better than that with the Swarmhost challenge, which is why I swapped back onto my main account with it, because I was winning way too many games. He starts with a provisional MMR, so maybe 5 or 10 games to start playing against master level opponents when he starts a new series. No. He literally does use 2 or 3 accounts and reuses or renames them when he starts a new series. No, he's clearly, unless he's doing it for different races, he's clearly made more than 2 or 3. 1, that's Zerg. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There's at least 9 Terran ones he's done, which means 9 separate Terran accounts. So that proves it's not just 2 or 3 accounts that he renames, because otherwise you wouldn't be doing your placement matches again on them. It should be noted, because the confidence of his MMR is very low. As he only wins games and never loses them initially, the impact it has on his opponent's MMR is minimal, which is the system working as intended. I thought you still just have a set MMR, even if it's changing very quickly. I mean, don't they lose the same MMR as normal? I didn't think the amount of MMR changed when you're playing someone in your placement matches. Let's see what Twitch chat has to say on this. Twitch chat says, yeah, that's not true. Anyone else know how that works? Because I've never heard of that. No, that's, yeah, it doesn't. Yeah. Don't get me wrong, he's very unlikely to play someone multiple times in a row because his MMR will go up so quickly. So it is just one loss. It's not like their MMR is going to go down a crazy amount, but it's not like the MMR change is different versus someone's in their placement matches. You still lose the normal amount of MMR. I think it'd be pretty neat to play against Uthermal, even though there's no chance I would win. 100% agree. Very fun to play against pros. It's actually really cool. Doesn't really answer anything in the complaints though. Doesn't really change the facts, unfortunately. In the video Uthermal posted today, he's doing his crazy builds with 6.3k MMR. Is that really smurfing? Says very serious man. Now, Ray Rainier, I already went through and upvoted this one, saying, look, obviously we're talking about the 2 GM challenges. He also does like crazy cheeses on close to his main MMR, and that's similar to what I do with a lot of my challenges that I was talking about, where if it's a good enough build, even if it's wacky, I'll do it on my main account. Uthermal does the same thing and is successful at an incredibly high level with it. So Ray Rain's like, well, that's not what we're talking about here. We've got another, oh, he's imposing rules on himself. He makes the game fun. He tries his best to win in the framework. He gets through the lower leagues quickly, 5 to 6 games with provisional MMR, and then he's in Masters to GM for the rest of the series, trying to top 10 on ladder or something along those lines. So this one keeps coming up, but looking at the most recent Planetary Rush to GM. All right, so in our most recent, this is actually not the most recent. Looks like he posted a new one. We can see he's up to 4,919 MMR, and he's played 22 games and 0. So he's getting closer to Grandmaster at this point, but it's taken 22 games. So it's still 22 games at people who are over 1,500 MMR below his main MMR. He's still 1,600 MMR away from his main MMR after 22 games. The it's just 5 or 6 games does not hold up at all. For someone who hopes the community was more mature, what an immature post. What Uthermal does is a service to the community. New players aren't organically coming to the game like it's 2010. Content creators objectively help bring new players and retain current players, and Uthermal is one of the best we have. Also, the content creates is more relatable to 99% of the player base compared to those high GM level games. And that's absolutely true. That's absolutely true. This is real. And that's exactly why a lot of people like to watch these guys historically more than like MMA or boxing and stuff, right? It's because it's accessible and entertaining. It is way entertaining. It brings so many people in. And I've had the same response with Bronze to GM, guys. The response to my Bronze to GM has been astronomical. You will not believe the number of players. I get every day new people in my chat I've never seen. It has the little thing in my Twitch chat that says first time viewer. And I've never seen them there before. And they're going, hey, just came from YouTube. Love your Bronze to GM. Got me into the game. And that makes me feel really good. It does. It makes me feel really positive and there's a good impact as a side effect of it. But it doesn't change that me smashing a bunch of players getting there was also something which was not a great thing to promote, both for encouraging other people to smurf or for me doing it myself. The reason why it's so accessible is because new viewers and casual viewers don't understand the difference between this and a real fight. That's just the way it is. You see someone hop on the ladder for the first time, bronze, I know what bronze is. That's the bottom. That's where I got placed on the ladder, or where I think I would get placed. It's relatable. It's easy to follow the story. And because there's no pressure on you as a player and streamer, you can talk the whole time. You can explain the details without it actually affecting your chances of winning the game. What it is it is beautiful, easy to make content. It's so easy. Bronze to GM, in the past when I've played against lower level players for challenges as well, or when I'm like laddering up a new account, I can talk the entire time. I could literally read you an audiobook while playing the game, and it makes it for better, more engaging content because I can commentate it. I don't need to do any editing. It's so easy for me to create, and so many people will watch it. It's hard to argue with that. As a content creator, that's so attractive, and I want to do more of it. What holds me back, though, is the fact that, and it also holds me back from watching and enjoying these videos, it's when I open up one of these videos, I go, I love Uthermal. Uthermal is a buddy. He taught me stuff about how to play ZVT back in the day when we practiced way back in like 2012, 2013, and we were coming up as players, and we've had beers together, and we are good mates. But when I watch a video like this, I can't get through much of it because I see that number at the top. I see these numbers, and I immediately realize I'm watching Floyd Mayweather boxing versus small child. And people are going, but I learned so much. And the thing is, because I know too much about StarCraft, and this is why the hardcore viewers are almost all anti-smurfing, and everyone below a certain rank, and there are some GMs as well who are on the side of smurfing for content. It's worth it, it's fun, don't get me wrong. But the majority of the hardcore, we see a small child getting punched in the face by Floyd Mayweather, and we see a whole horde of people going, but we're learning so much about punching technique. Isn't it cool where he did a little pirouette and then gave him an uppercut and knocked the tooth? And we go, but it's a small child. There's nothing impressive about this because you're versing a small child. And that's what tilts the heck out of the hardcore viewers who really know a lot more about the game. Because, like, don't get me wrong. Uthermal puts himself in compromising situations. Like, he does. Check this out. Check out this game. This game, look at this. He's got a planetary rush going up, and it's so close and tiltillating. Like, it's so interesting at surface value. Look at this planetary on radar points. Watch this whole sequence. This is insane. He has a ghost. When do you see a ghost Hellions at a planetary out front the Zerg base this early? This is wild. And look at that. The planetary you think is going to die, but remember, I think he's got building armor as well, maybe. And the SCV pops and starts referring and keeps alive. This is so fucking hype. Until you remember that there is a small child getting punched in the face, and that is this barcode Zerg player who's no match for him. Now, this is not as bad as the 1-0 match or the 2-0 match. This is 23-0. This is a player who's almost 5k MMR. They are a Masters 1 player. They're a pretty good StarCraft player, so it's not a small child. It's an amateur boxer from the local gym who Floyd Mayweather is punching in the face. And we go, okay, it's still a bit far outside of his realm, and it still ends up being a little bit more to us. We feel like this is kind of like, I guess it's more like Logan Paul boxing versus Mayweather, right? You're like, it's not even, no, it's someone lower level than that. Logan Paul is still a bit better at boxing. It's Deji versus, I don't know what a good analogy is for people who don't follow boxing at all. The point is there is still a huge mismatch, and that's what makes it hard for me to watch this sort of content, because for me, I feel like all of the, almost moments where things seem dicey, the stakes are lowered for me when I'm watching it, because I know that Uthermal could chop both of his kneecaps off, be waddling around on, you know, he could be like the knight from Monty Python and the Holy Grail, where he's hopping around on one stump with blood spurting from his limbs, and he could still headbutt most of his opponents unconscious. And that's That's what kills it for me. Because, like, look at the planetary smurfing on Reddit points. How are you going to get an epic and unique moment like that for a thumbnail, for YouTube, and for viewers, and for hype, and for virality when you're playing against equal competition? You're not. And that's why this is like the Harlem Globetrotters sort of let's do show-off stuff. And it's so much easier to do when you're playing against lower level people. I'm one of these people that just got into the game. Look, I'd been familiar with StarCraft only from only peripherally, but one day, 1v7 Insane AI Challenge popped on my feed. It was mesmerizing. Seeing content creator like Uthem was so good-natured and positive, it gave me an immediate good impression of the community. I kept watching the Wild Nonsense DJM series for a little while until I started playing, and now I love the game. I do admit smurfing is bad practice, but if there's a good purpose to it and it's done in good humor, I think it's totally justified. I wouldn't have started if it weren't for Uthem. I wouldn't have got better as quickly as if it wasn't for Pig's Bronze to GM series. It is smurfing. It's really great content. I think ultimately outweighs the inherent wrongs. So shout out to Toasty Boat here on Reddit, who I think has made one of the most reasonable defenses. Most of the defenses I've gone through up to this point of Uthermal have had me spewing in rage because it's just been like, but oh, he gets to masters quickly. Ugh. This one I feel like actually comes up with basically, it says, look, it's not really good smurfing, but like this got me into the game. This is so positive. And this is the sort of stuff that for me is what changed my mind a little bit about Bronze to GM with Vibe. And I made a video years ago saying, you know, seeing the response and the number of new peoples it brings in and him just, you know, doing it kind of ethically, like within its own little bubble, I'm kind of okay with it. I used to hate Bronze to GM, but I was kind of okay with it. And that was years before I did my Bronze to GM, where I kind of made that shift from hating Bronze to GM, thinking it was the most disgusting content, to going, it's a bit unethical, but like it does serve a good purpose, right? So this person's saying, look, I agree it's not that great, but I think it's just so good at getting new players into it that it's good. And that is where this argument really comes to. We can scroll through this Reddit thread all day, but at the end of the day, it's a personal choice. Do you think that's bad or not? I do think it's something where doing these repeated series of 2GM is just unnecessarily easy. And don't get me wrong, you're always going to be making compromises. If I go for a strategy and I start on a 5k MMR account, 500-600 MMR below my main MMR, and then I realize, guess what? That challenge is actually way easier than I thought, and it's not that hard, and I might kill 6 people in a row and go, that was basically me smurfing. I didn't realize it, but I was smurfing, and those people feel like they got trolled. And I've had people respond to me and go, yeah, thanks for trolling me, like, you piece of crap, basically. Like, good to know I'm getting smurfed. Because they can tell that I'm playing at a higher level than I should be for the MMR on the account. And they can feel it, and it's not a good feeling to feel like you're getting toyed with. And especially, it's not a good feeling to have someone build a planetary outside your base and screw with you. Don't get me wrong. If they're at least equally skilled, you go, I can't believe it happened to me. Oh, I'm such a friggin' idiot. And you might be a bit angry. But when you know that person is basically abusing the competitive system to find easy matches where they can make their silly stuff work, it is a negative experience for the people who view it. So my name got brought up a few times. Okay, guys, so here we go. Check this out. So in this thread, Dougal says, Pig hit crisp cycles of warping in 10 rapid-fired stalkers at once against the same legitimately bronze player 2 games in a row in his Bronze to GM series. That shit is the absolute worst version of smurfing. Uthermal smurfing is somewhere in the middle, not technically against the rules, new accounts, not intentionally losing, but yes, still smurfing. Now that's actually a good, that's definitely a good point. But this is something I argued back against vehemently. There was a lot of people who disliked my Bronze to GM because they said I played too good for the lower leagues because I was using advanced mechanics. Now, I always said from the start, rather than teaching you to use shit mechanics, that's like teaching someone to hold the guitar wrong and then saying, well, now you're experienced, now we're going to relearn how to hold the guitar. I said from the start, we're going to be using mechanics that most players won't be using till you're in Platinum or above. And yes, that means you, with very little mouse or keyboard speed, can do things way faster and better than them. And I don't care that it's smurfing, because people say, well, it's smurfing. And I would say, it's smurfing. I'm going to kill them either way. It doesn't matter. What I'm going to show is I'm going to play slowly. I'm going to show you. And there were times in Bronze to GM where I went a bit beyond that as well. But it's just funny. People are like, that's the worst. Whereas, and people would say, Vibe's more ethical because he sits there for 45 minutes macroing to 100 workers and A-moving armies without looking at them. And I'm like, how is that more ethical? There's no way he's going to lose. Either way, the only difference is he's taking way longer to kill them. But they still have a feeling of hopelessness, whereas I kill them pretty quickly. Because I'm trying to just say, okay, here's the fundamentals we've taught, now kill them with the timing attack. Here's the fundamental macro, kill them with the timing attack, right? That's kind of my teaching method, is much more focused on that. So I really bite back against this sort of stuff where people would see me do stuff that wasn't for that league, and they're like, people have this whole idea that if you impersonate that league well enough, everything's excusable, and I'm like, it makes no difference. If you imitate that league a little bit, you're still going to win the game. Like, there's no way to like pretend you're a bronze player as a pro gamer. It's not going to happen. It's a ridiculous idea. So Nificent says, I don't care if a GM smurfs me. It shows me what's actually possible. It makes me a better player than playing people my level. Boo-hoo. I've heard this response a lot in the Reddit thread and elsewhere. So this is a really good, interesting one. It makes me a better player. It shows me what's possible. So that's the thing there's two things here. Number one, is there value in playing someone higher level? Yes. Can it be an eye-opening experience? Yes. So there can be good things that you can derive from it. On the other hand, is smurfing as a widespread practice good? If you're playing and you're constantly playing people who are way higher level than you, is that good? No. So you can look at this and you can have a drop in the sea argument. You can say he is a drop in the sea, a single drop in the ocean, right? I'll get one game against him. It's not going to ruin me whole day. Don't care. Move on to the next one. The problem is always going to be the widespread acceptance of smurfing, right? We can always look at one small wrong and say that is insignificant. But the problem is when that gets extrapolated and that gets popular and more people do it, and more people watch series and are encouraged to do it, that's where you end up having something where suddenly what was a tiny, almost unnoticeable problem can become a much bigger problem. And that's why, for me, I will always look down on smurfing and I will always have issues with it. And whenever I do something that requires me playing on a lower account, I will always try to question it at least a little bit. And I don't have the perfect answers. I smurfed my ass off in Bronze to GM. I'm not on my high horse saying Uthermal's the bad guy. I want to reiterate that, and I probably should have said this earlier. He's not the worst person in the world. He's literally doing what Beastie Cutie had massive success with for years before him, and dozens of StarCraft content creators have done before. This is not a personal attack on you, Thermal. This is honestly a discussion, and I want to hear from you guys as well, your thoughts on what's going on and stuff, because for me, I really feel like this is one of those interesting questions which we have to answer. Let's go over to Twitter, where Fear Dragon posted up a thread. Since we're questioning this and talking about it, what's right, what's wrong, he said, look, since everyone's talking about it right now, I'm curious how people feel about this whole topic. I make brand new accounts when I learn a new build. When I learn new build orders or styles so I can gradually figure out the style, is this smurfing? Yes, that's smurfing, 66.6%. I voted yes, guys, in case you can see that's what that tick means. Or actually, maybe that just means that one won, but I did vote for that. And no, that's not smurfing, 33%. Now, obviously, this is on Twitter. People who follow Fear Dragon, this is a hardcore slice of people this is being taken from. Whereas if you ask the YouTube comment section on Uthermal's video, you'd get 95%. Of course, it's not smurfing. Or maybe 80% that, 10, 15%. Well, it's fine. It's okay smurfing. I'm okay with it because this is fun and entertaining and we like him. A few different things. Now, Fear Dragon says, I asked this partially because I don't personally think it's that different from someone doing a challenge on a new account that places restrictions on what they do. Gradually perfecting the idea as the difficulty ramps up. No, it's the exact same thing. In my opinion, this is the exact same thing. Don't get me wrong, Fear Dragon's not as high level as Uthermal, so you can say, well, it's not as big of a mismatch. If he starts in Platinum, wins 5 placement matches, because you start right around the middle, 3k MMR, you win 5 placement matches, you're at 3.5, your actual MMR, I don't know what Fear Dragon's actual MMR is, Masters 2, I want to guess? He's like 1,000 MMR off his main MMR, so that still is smurfing for sure, in my opinion, right? And don't get me wrong, this brings up another issue. You have to smurf to play StarCraft. So just get this, especially in team games, anytime you want to play an arranged team game match with a new team partner, it starts you at fresh MMR. There's no way to avoid that. Every time, this is why I hate playing team games with someone new, because the first like 10 games are just getting to playing people where I don't feel like I'm beating up people way lower level than me. That's just a shitty system on Blizzard's part. Likewise though, especially with free-to-play, I can make a new account any day and level it up. And I've had to do that for a few of my accounts for doing different challenges and things, and I don't particularly enjoy it, but I am forced to smurf when making a new account, which is why I try to limit the number of new accounts I have, and instead I have a whole system where I try to recycle them, and I'm oh, this MMR is about right for this challenge, this MMR is about right for this challenge. And sometimes when I'm starting a day of recording videos, I log in and out of 4 different accounts checking the MMR to find the one that has the sort of closest MMR to what I'm looking for that I think is the right starting point for that challenge. it's very selfish to affect a lower league player's MMR because you're going to come in and make them lose the game just because you want to try something out. Test your new builds or whatever with the AI. Who doesn't care and won't be affected? Now, don't get me wrong. Testing against the AI is not as good practice. It is good to have an off account where you try crazier stuff, and that's sort of good. It's not really necessarily about the MMR as much as the experience of the players, but it's also that thing where I really feel, and I think selfish is the key word. There was a few other threads and comments, I can't really find them, but what they basically said was what you're prioritizing is your experience over your opponents. Whenever you smurf, you're basically saying, I want an easier path of learning this thing. When I was learning my fastest battlecruiser ever build, I wanted to tear my effing hair out. It was really, really hard because I kept getting smashed, including by 4.5k MMR players. I was playing people 500-600 MMR lower than me and they were beating me, and I was like, God, this build sucks. How can I make this work? And I was trying to optimize it, and I lost so many games trying to figure it out. And that was the hard way of learning it, and that's what I get for not creating a new account. Where if I created a new account and did it, I would have had a much smoother on-road, would have been able to win as I refined the build, and by the time I got to Masters, I might have even been able to beat one of those Masters 1 or GM players, one or two of those with the build, because I've had so much time to figure it out without having to go through any of the pain of losing. And that's the real question at the end of the day is, who do you prioritize? Your opponent's getting a fair ladder environment, which they rightfully should expect for the most part, or do you prioritize your own time and you'd rather just enjoy winning games as you figure things out, have an easier learning road? And that for me is why it comes down to a question of selfishness. And at the end of the day, I have to go through those 17 losses for 3 wins doing my BC challenge to do that, because otherwise I would feel like, oh, okay, I'm just trolling people with BCs and it kind of feels nasty. Don't get me wrong, I killed some people with the BC build and they thought I was like trolling and smurfing them or whatever and got angry about it. They did not realize just how many games I lost to get those very few victories. What about this pig? I think a lot of the anti-Euthermal comes from a darker place, jealousy or something. He did rise very quickly. Thing is, his success isn't only about tactics, but because of his personality and his narration, says Bruno's. So that's an interesting idea. It does come from a dark place, and that's because I've seen everyone who does take that easy road get further ahead, and I've seen when I've done it, I get further ahead as well. So the thing is, it's both motivated by jealousy, 100% it is. I am absolutely jealous, not just of him. Winter back in the day with viewbotting, very jealous. Super jealous. I will openly admit, I was very jealous of Winter back in the day. Because he was viewbotting for years and basically was always at the top of the viewership, and everyone knew coming to the directory would see his stream before anyone else's.
Thanks for the Bezos box.
Same thing with Beastie Cutie when his YouTube was popping off and everyone's like, oh, his YouTube's so fun. I have like casual friends like, I love his YouTube, it's great. And I'm like, oh, and I looked at like what he was doing and I was like, okay, I love these ideas. Let's see if I can do it in GM. And I was like, I can create some fun games, but it's just way more work to do it. And it's not quite as dramatic because I can't talk and narrate as much the whole time because I'm playing reasonably fair matches, right? So it's one of those things. So don't get me wrong, that everyone's always going to have a certain element of playing below their level when they go on a new server or make a new account. Like there's no, everything here is very gray. So I think anyone coming to this, and I've already seen a few people respond very negatively, both in my Twitch chat and on the Reddit thread and start shouting at each other. I want you all to remember there is no clear black and white line. We can draw some lines and say this is the boundary or that's the boundary, but everybody's always going to have a certain amount of smurfing in just leveling up a new account or anything like that. It's really all just about where we say what's okay and what's not. So my question that I want to posit for everybody out there is it okay? Should Euthermal do what me and Harstem do and try to play at an actual MMR for that account and really put pains in to do that and have the content suffer a little bit? Or should he be reaching hundreds of thousands and millions of people out there with fun, captivating content that is at the expense of the more experienced viewers realizing that this is not a fair match, it's not close, and that it is, of course, giving a very unfair experience for the 24 players that it takes him to get to Masters 1? I want to hear your thoughts. I think I'm couching this in a very anti-Euthermal way, but I want to take a step back from that, so I want to kind of go, obviously I think that, but there is a greedy part of me, and if you guys want to see more of my content go viral, just say, no, it's fine, it's all good. It's all fine, pig. Because then I also can say, screw it, I did bronze to GM. Screw you, hardcore nerds. Get wrecked. And I can just put on my dark, I can go dark pig. I can just basically be like, guys, I can go and make new accounts. Do you guys know how much content I can make if I cross that line? And that is why I have internal turmoil. Do you know how much fun I could have doing crazy challenges? And I would even do it in a good way. I would do it just like Euthermal. I would put even heavier restrictions on myself than Euthermal. I would make it even sillier. I would up the silly factor. I would do it with I would do it, and you guys would have amazing content. I'd just also encourage everyone out there to smurf, and there'd be more people smurfing as a result, but I'd have so much fun doing it, and I could grow my channels, and I don't know. I'm so torn because so many people are so positive towards this sort of content and say the fact that the content is so good makes it worth it. Join the Pig. We want to see the Pigger Taker. We want to see you with a piggy mask picking up silver players, platinum players, diamond players, ripping their head off their shoulders, throwing it against the wall. We want you and Euthermal to do a 2v2 collab. We just keep making new accounts and playing 2v2, and we're playing ping pong with the heads of our victims, and we're like, ha ha! And we're smashing chairs over them and shit. And then there's drama, and we turn on each other. Like, there could be so much drama and fun. So at the end of the day, I just want to say that because there is a voice inside me that says, fuck it, let's just throw caution to the wind. Who cares about ethics? Views are what matters, and if the majority of people like it, then who gives a shit about the haters? The hardcore players are always going to be there. Yeah, they'll spread a bit of negativity, but they're not going to stop the fact that I'm bringing a huge influx of players into StarCraft. So for me, I don't know, guys. I'm torn. Obviously, you can tell my historical view has been very anti-smurfing. Over the years, it's lessened to the point where I even smurfed a Bronze to GM series, which is super popular and is still getting tons of views years after I've done the Zerg section of it. 6 months or more since I finished the Protoss one. Let me know. Because I don't know what the result is here in the community. I think I have a feeling all the hardcore players are anti-smurf and all the other ones aren't. But I'd especially like to hear from pro gamers. I want to hear from streamers, community members. I want to hear them all weigh in on this controversial topic and just say, I think this is wrong, or I think this is actually totally fine. I just want us to come to a little bit more of a clear discussion about this topic, and hopefully we can at least learn more and figure out how to think about this topic a little bit more. So I'm torn here. I hope I did a good job of ripping apart some of the Reddit discussions and excuses, because most of the excuses for Euthermal were absolute garbage. The few really good ones were, it's captivating content, it gets new players in, and that's worth it. People on the other side saying it encourages smurfing and encourages basically stuff which is antithetical to any competitive environment, which is, of course, playing against people who are way worse than you, rather than trying to be much more ethical in your smurfing by having your crazy builds account that's 5.5k MMR or 5.2k or wherever the number ends up being, just depending on the craziness of the challenge. Those are the two arguments. Let me know which side you're on. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a good one.